Hey, everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Widener Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget, Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Widener Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Widener Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is an illusion and those you love will be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has got great reviews and even loved and enjoyed by Howard celebrities, including Jenna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for it goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Widener Show at themikewidenershow.com on over 30 podcast platforms, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also, Anchor FM, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, Apple Music, and more. Take the Mike Widener Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Widener Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Widener Show on Instagram and Twitter today. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Widener Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags. Makes great gifts year-round, 24/7 for family, friends, and loved ones. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia and check out his great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles. Also cool merchandise like T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, and phone cases and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check it out today and support the Mike Widener Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWidenerShow.com. Make sure you give generously today. We're here with a terrific lady who is an author and educator. She grew up in Detroit, where she lived through the 1967 rebellion, and she joined the Shrine of the Black Madonna, searching for a way to stop injustice and rebuild her world, and also volunteered in a church community for 28 years that have purchased and built numerous training facilities, institutions, and nurseries, also dining halls and cultural centers and more. And of course, the latest book, by the way, which is called Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation, talks about fascinating research about the history, the proof that Mary and Jesus came from an African Jewish community. We'll talk about that. She's also owner of a child-focused consulting group and also a committed educator for 35 years, certified in Texas and Michigan. And speaking of Michigan, live, ladies and gentlemen, from the Plus Studios from beautiful outside Detroit, Michigan, the very multi-talented author and educator, her latest book, Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation, Dr. Shelley McIntosh. Dr. Shelley, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity.
Well, it's great to have you on board, too. I mean, you've got an amazing 35 years of experience and everything. You grew up in Detroit, where you lived through the 67 rebellion, joined the Shrine of the Black Madonna, searching for a way to stop injustice and rebuild her world. You also volunteered in the church community for 28 years. You're a committed educator for 35. You're certified in not just in Michigan, but also in Texas. And let's talk about your book as well, including fascinating research about history proving that Mary and Jesus came from an African Jewish community. And before we get into all that, Dr. Shelley, tell us how you first got started.
Okay, so I always say that education chose me. Mm-hmm. And I believe just people were put on my path that led me that way. My mother and father, my father was a Baptist pastor, so he had me teaching Sunday school at a very young age. Wow. And I believe because maybe there were no adults there to do it. So he chose his children to do it. So I was teaching a 5-year-old group when I was about 11 or 12 years old.
Wow, okay.
So I came up in the Baptist church. Again, my father was a Baptist minister. And education chose me. As I grew up, I always found myself working with children and teaching. So I've read quite a lot. I've studied quite a lot. I have to give credit to my father for giving me the love of reading. And so studying, researching, that's all a part of me. But in terms of Detroit, by the time I was 18 years old, I lived through 4 assassinations.
Oh my
Robert
goodness.
F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X and Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.
Wow.
I also lived through the 1967 Detroit Rebellion, which was the largest in the history of America. Not only that, but I watched the civil rights movement and saw that children, women, and men were being attacked by dogs and fire hosed and then thrown into jail. But at 18 years old, I didn't know why all these things were happening. So I just had that big question mark. In fact, with the 1967 rebellion, the Army and the National Guard were housed at our high school. So we couldn't go to school for a week or two.
Oh my gosh.
And Detroit was really under military occupation during that time. Still, the question was why? Why are these things happening? So my oldest sister shopped at the Shrines of the Black Madonna bookstore and cultural center. And she brought a bag home one time with bangles and a necklace. And she pulled out the book, The Black Messiah, written by the late Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., the father of the father of liberation theology. So I asked her if I could read that book, and she said yes. So I read it in 3 days. Then I told her, we need to go visit that church. So in the midst of winter, as it is now here in Detroit, very cold, we crunched through the snow, caught 2 buses to the Shrine of the Black Madonna, located on Linwood and Hogarth. The church was packed with a lot of people. The energy was high. And that was the first time I saw the mural of the Black Madonna and Child. Wow. And so from the pulpit, it was preached that we are faced with oppression, we're faced with injustice, but the church can be the institution to spin off other institutions to help end that. And so that I joined that day.
That's rather interesting too. And I was thinking about the 67 rebellion as well too, that you've seen on the news with other rebellions that happened, like in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and there was other places. And of course, thinking about that, it's like, what would you say severity was in those cities compared to Detroit? And was it like all the same thing, or like the degree of intensity? It's like, I've never been in it itself as well too, that, how would you describe the intensity, like compared to the other rebellions that happened in the 60s, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and other places?
Yes, those rebellions did spread across the United States in major cities because Black people were basically facing the same type of experiences. So if we wanted to put it in 2 words, it's the Black experience. And so that traveled throughout the states, not only the states, but it traveled overseas. It traveled into prisons. This whole urge, this whole passion to be free of second-class citizenship, being free of police brutality, being free of redlining and gentrification. So I would say in comparison, I've read where the 1967 rebellion in Detroit was the largest and was the, the most prominent one, even though I know that the other ones took place in those cities.
And there's also been riots as well, too, as of late as well. Back a few years ago, you had the riots in Ferguson. You also had, riots, I think you also in Los Angeles and New York. And I think you also had some in Florida as well, too, that, do you think we've learned anything from these rebellions? Do you think the rebellions we saw today has less of a magnitude? And what have we learned from all this?
Well, the protests and rebellions only take us so far unless we start making some systemic changes. And so with the Shrines of the Black Madonna, knowing that protests take you only so far, then there needs to be a program. There needs to be a structure, an organization that helps Black people to build their own institutions, to become self-determining. In that sense, being able to have some kind of influence and impact on our own communities to make sure that the people in those communities thrive and that our children thrive, that there's a sense of safety and security, So I would say it like this: the rebellions and the protests serve a certain purpose, but after that, there has to be a strategic program to end the injustice and the police brutality. So as I said before, the Shrine of the Black Madonna as a church institution believed that it could spin off other institutions to help the survival, salvation, quality of life for Black people.
That is very amazing. And you also volunteer in church community yourself, 28 years. You built numerous training institutions, nurseries, dining halls, children institutes, and mediation, cultural centers. And of course, that also inspired to write the book. And you really put a lot of work to it, 28 years. I mean, that's so amazing.
The amazing part of this, the Shrine created a counter culture, a counter institution. So when I say 28 years of volunteering, it was much bigger than that. The church said that if you can give your time and talent and skills to helping build these institutions and create these institutions, the church would provide security from the cradle to the grave. So it was more than just volunteering, it was my way of life for those 28 to 30 years. Not just mine, but other hundreds of other young Black people did the same thing.
And that's so, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so in spinning off the institution from the main church institution, we purchased properties in Detroit and Atlanta and in Houston, transformed these properties into nurseries, meditation centers, cultural centers, residence halls where people could live, training centers, thinking, communal dining halls where we could share with our meals, educational centers where we provided academic support for our children, and all of them could read before kindergarten, and all of them graduated from high school. These institutions were a spinoff of the main church institution.
Okay. And you also been a teacher for 35 years, not just in Michigan, but also in Texas as well, too. And now you mentioned Houston as well, too. Did you teach in the Houston area, or whereabouts in Texas did you also teach?
Yes, in the Houston area. Okay. And so I do want to make a point that I taught in the church also. I ran that youth program for over 21 years. And we created a children's institute based on the Israeli kibbutzim and African communalism. So our children lived in dormitory type settings where we addressed them academically, physically, spiritually, and socially. And in Houston, I also taught at a third grade in Houston. Not only that, but I also was an assistant professor at the University of Houston downtown.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I taught those who wanted to become teachers. And I was there for several years when I decided to move back to Detroit. So the organic education shows me that was my educational journey in Houston.
Okay. And also, too, I was just thinking about it. How would you describe today's education in 2022?
That is a good question. And that is my passion, because I looked at the scores, the reading scores by state of Michigan, and also the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And African-American students are still scoring very low in terms of reading.
Wow.
The gap is still there. African-American students, Latino students, they're still scoring low. So if you ask, what is the state of education? Then I would say that it is failing a lot of students. I'm sure there's some aspects that are working, but in terms of literacy, if a student is not competent in literacy, it's very difficult for them to be competent in school or to have academic success. So that's one part of it. Mike, the other part is the funding for urban schools. And that is really, there's inequitable funding. So I've gone into schools And I've seen the physical environment where the school needed painting, where floors were buckling, where the boiler system couldn't warm up all the classrooms at the same time.
Wow.
So this is in Detroit, Michigan. So I'm saying that the whole educational system is failing a lot of our students. And that is my passion. You mentioned me having child-focused consulting company. That is my company. And we have retired school teachers. These are teachers who've served in the Detroit public school system for 30, 35 years.
Wow.
They're retired, but they have this passion to support our students in literacy. And so I contract with a couple of schools, and my team goes in and we work with small groups of students to help increase their literacy skills.
Okay, that's amazing. And where can we find child focus consulting at?
Okay, so I do have a website, and it is childfocus-consultants.com. The information would be there, but I also have a page on my other website, which is my author website at ShelleyMcIntosh.com. And you can find the child focus services on both of those.
We certainly will do so. And speaking of your website, you being an author, we'll talk about your amazing book, Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation. We'll talk about it in just 1 minute. But first, you listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by SonicWeb Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget, SonicWeb Studios is the answer. SonicWeb Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. It's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. SonicWeb Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those you love will be the first to go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews and even loved and endorsed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for Girls Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com on over 30 podcast platforms. Take The Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to The Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow The Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. And for great gift ideas 24/7, go to Amazon.com and check out The Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia for great books, merchandise, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check it out today. Also support The Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and TheMikeWagnerShow.com. Make sure you give generously today. We're here with author and educator, Dr. Shelley McIntosh of outside Detroit here on The Mike Wagner Show. You got a book out called Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation. And tell us more about the book as well, too, including your fascinating research about historical proof that Mary and Jesus, came from an African Jewish community, and more about the book.
Okay, so Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation. I'd like to just kind of hit on why it is called Black Christian Nationalism. So Black identifies our connection with Africa, that our ancestors came from Africa. That's what that means. Mm-hmm. And according to research, 86% of Black people in the United States identify themselves as Christians, more so than any other race. Mm-hmm. So Christian is, I was a Christian before I joined the Shrines of the Black Madonna, because my father was a Baptist pastor. And so Christian relates to the life and mission of Jesus, the Black Messiah. I'll get to the DNA in 1 minute. So that Christian focuses on his life more so than his death, and the context of the world that he lived in and what was happening at that particular time, which was the nation Israel, the Black nation Israel, was oppressed by the Romans, and they were trying to free themselves from that. Nationalists, I think people may get afraid of the term nationalist because they just may think it's an extreme right. That's not what it is. Every group of people naturally move together to create a life that ensures safety, security, food, shelter, and clothing for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that is, nothing is wrong with that. So you have the Japanese, Chinese, Euro-Americans. You have people who come together for that particular purpose, to thrive, to build a world where their children can live and thrive and grow. That is a natural movement. So nationalism or nationalism means that we believe in building that type of world for ourselves too, and building that type of world with power, where we can peacefully exist with other nations. So that's the nationalist part of it. So when you mentioned about the Blackness of Jesus, I'm not the first one to say this. Scholars have said this years and years ago through historical research. But the latest research, 20 years old, is the DNA research, which can be found on PBS. I've seen documentaries on it. So what happened is a group of scientists wanted to know if there was any kind of connection with the Caucasian rabbis, Jewish rabbis. Mm-hmm. And they did the DNA test and found that there was a Y chromosome haplotype that was common to all of them. And then when people in Africa heard that, Ethiopia, the Lemba people, the Igbo people, they said, well, we would like for you to come and take our DNA too. Huh. Ethiopians said, we can trace our ancestry back to King Solomon. So they did do that. And what they found was that those African people had the same Y chromosome haplotype, except that it was denser in their DNA. So even today, you have the Igbo people and the Lemba people who are saying that we are Jewish. We are the African Jews, original African Jews.
Huh, interesting.
But they're still fighting for that official identity from their government. In Ethiopia, a lot of those African Jews were airlifted to Israel, but their settlement in Israel, they faced the same type of injustice and oppression and police brutality that African Americans face here in Detroit. They're still fighting for their freedom too. Wow. So from the history in terms of geographically where Jesus was born, and then with the DNA research, he was and she was African. Now, I know that probably when people hear that may upset people, but the truth is supposed to set us free. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it doesn't. It makes us build more barriers around what we don't know. So there are books written by Hugh Schonfield, who is he's passed on now, he's a British scholar. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1948 by a shepherd boy, it began to tell of the real struggles that Israel was going through. Domination by the Greeks, then domination by the Romans. The time that Jesus was born, the Black nation Israel was dominated by the Romans. Mm. And that is historically true.
Wow.
So when we look at Jesus being baptized at the River Jordan, no one else saw that experience but Jesus when he said he had power. Mm-hmm. And then in Luke, he says that he's come to free the oppressed, to set the downtrodden free, to proclaim the Lord's year of favor. That was the same thing that the prophet Isaiah said in the Old Testament. Hmm. So Jesus really joined a movement that had been started by, or at this point headed by, John the Baptist. So John the Baptist was beheaded, and Jesus took over that particular movement. So when we look at Jesus and what we discovered and researched, then when we look at Jesus, he was a Jew. He was never a Christian. He was a Jew. That after his death, and when his disciples experienced this power, they call it Pentecost, that was a movement. It wasn't just a church. It was a movement of them seeking to free themselves from Roman oppression. So there are books out there that talk about that. There are some documentaries that will point to that. And Hugh Schonfield's books, it talks about the Pentecost Revolution, the Jesus Party. There are some books called the Essene Odyssey. The Essenes set themselves apart. You won't find it in some Bibles because they've taken those books out. So we're left with the New Testament and the Old Testament, but there is the Apocrypha that talks of the Greek domination and how the Maccabees fought against that. So Mike, it's this studying that we had to do in the Shrines of the Black Madonna. The founder, Reverend Albert B. Clay, believed in discipline study. So when I joined, we were given a book list of 25 books to read.
Wow.
And then after that, we continued to studied documentations from Caucasian authors as well as African-American authors. Wherever we found that information, we studied that. And so what I'm speaking from is not a fairy tale. I'm speaking from research and study about who Jesus is and who he was. So if you have him leading this movement to free themselves from Roman oppression, that's the reason he was crucified.
Okay.
A crucifixion is a Roman execution. The Romans created that. So he was crucified because he was stirring up the people. When he went into the temple, and many Christians know that story, and he overturned the tables, that wasn't just a fairy tale act. The temple was the center of power. And there were taxes collected in the temple. There were governments. There were places where they made laws. All this took place in the temple. So when he went into the temple and did that, that was a strike against the existing power structure. Not only was Jesus crucified, but as we read on, all of his disciples were crucified. Why? Why? If they were spreading a message of peace, why are they crucified? They were crucified because the first Christian church was a movement for liberation and freedom. And when the Shrine of the Black Madonna, the founder, he worked with a lot of historians, a book called The African Origins of Christianity, and rediscovering who he really was. That was the theology that the Shrine of the Black Madonna based their program on. That we are adopting the same struggle that Jesus was in, and that same struggle is going on today.
That sounds like a struggle that's going on, especially going from 2,000 years. You mentioned about, what was it, the book of, was it Akapa or Agapa? And I'm trying to... Apocrypha. Okay. And I've heard about the book of Maccabees. There's also a book of Jasper, and there's also, or Jasher, and there's also some other books as well, too, like with Tolbert, and also an extension of, I'm trying to think right now, it'll come to me later. Where was that book, Apocrypha, placed around the New or Old Testament? Where was that placed?
Okay, the Apocrypha is placed between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And you can find it in the New Jerusalem Bible. They kept some books in there. And I think someone told me that there's maybe the Revised Standard Version, maybe one version has those books in there, but they can be found on the internet, the books of the Apocrypha. and then other books that were taken out of the Bible. But you mentioned the Maccabees. The Maccabees fought against Greek oppression, and it was guerrilla warfare for them. And they did succeed. But with the early Christian church, that movement, it failed. And so in 70, I believe it was 70 AD, the Romans finally defeated them. And the Jewish and Christian, that movement was stopped. The African Jewish Christian movement was stopped.
Okay.
So the Roman Church, the Roman Empire, adopted Christianity later because they saw the commitment, the passion that these early Christians, African Christians had. They adopted it to save the Roman Empire because the Roman Empire was on a decline. Mm-hmm. So there were Roman bishops set up as they set up their church, and these Roman bishops met in the Council of Nicaea. Mm-hmm. And in these councils, they reinterpreted the life of Jesus. What we know of Jesus, a lot of that came out of those councils. So they set the birthday of Jesus. They also could not say that he was the Black Messiah. So they said that he was the Son of God, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and said that Jesus was the Son. Then they said that you can have faith without works and you can still get to heaven. These type of tenets were put into the Roman Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. The image was painted, like Michelangelo in the 15th century painted Jesus white. But a lot of these images of Jesus being Black and his mother being Black, those are still in museums. Okay. So the Michelangelo painting Jesus white. So now this whole image and life of Jesus has been distorted. And even in my father's house, there was an image of a white Jesus. And I think the world has been living with that for quite a while, that false image. Mm-hmm.
And again, it's also around 2,000 years, 1,000 years, somewhere around there. And I also thought about it too, like with the oppression. Also, I wasn't sure if it was mentioned too about the Pharaohs well too, and how he treated people in Egypt as well too. So I don't know if there's anything that's tied to the Pharaoh or anything like that. So,
well, the Egyptian pharaohs, they were African, and if you have a group of people who's fighting or who's struggling for their freedom, for their own land, yes, in Egypt they were, but not at the same extent as the African slave trade. But it's still a form of oppression, and no people deserve to be oppressed. Mm-hmm. So that history of the Black nation Israel started back in the Old Testament 4,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. When that covenant was made between Abraham and with God, I'll be your God if you will be my people. So they struggled for a long time to become a people, to live like a people, to love, to share, to act like a people. So they were oftentimes captured by other African nations.
Wow.
And so, yes, the Pharaohs, Egyptian Pharaoh was part of that oppression, and that's how they left out of Egypt, with the Moses and parting of the Red Sea.
Yes, that's my favorite part. I watched the 10 Commandments, the 57, 58 version, Cecil B. DeMille. It's like I can still remember in my head, God and this and that, and then just the water's just part. I mean, that was just pure cinematography back then. So
it was. So that struggle of Israel, the Bible really is the history of the struggles of the Black nation Israel. And that, again, many people don't want to digest that. But if you read carefully in there, we see that nation is mentioned over 1,000 times because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to have their own way of taking care of themselves, of not being oppressed by another people. So it's in there. Then they run into where they don't want to serve God. You know, they want a king, and then God gives them a king. And then the kings also, some of them are not doing the right things. So it is a history. You can trace their history of the Black nation Israel, struggling to become a people and to become a covenant people of God.
And I remember too, they're complaining about they want a king, then a king of a king of a king of a king. And I remember that they got fed up with Moses. They started, making a golden calf and then started dancing around it. So I had that picture as well too. It's just like, oh my goodness.
Yes. So it was difficult. It was a difficult journey.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
The fact remains is that the Bible is a history of the Black nation Israel. And what we've gotten today is really a distorted image and some distorted truth.
And that's in the book, Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation. And where can we find your book at, Dr. Shelley?
Okay, it's on several platforms. Now, the Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist chronicles my life as a Black Christian nationalist for that almost 30 years. But it also interweaves the doctrines and the program of the church, showing how we work together, how we all chipped in, also how we work to change ourselves so that we could be a benefit to other people. So the book is found on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, at Walmart, Target, Detroit Book City Club. It's on several platforms. And a person can go to my website, ShelleyMcIntosh.com, and they can, there's an Amazon connection there.
Okay, we will certainly check that out. And what's coming up for Dr. Shelley McIntosh in 2022, we'll find out just 1 minute. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Also brought to you by our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. We'll be back with author and educator Dr. Shelley McIntosh after this time out. We're back with author and educator Dr. Shelley McIntosh. We talked about the book Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation here on the Mike Wagner Show. Lots of fascinating stories. Learned a lot from you, Dr. Shelley. And what can we expect from you in 2022 and beyond?
Well, in 2022, I would love to have some platforms to talk about the book in detail, because I think people will find it very fascinating. And there's a lot of information there. Not only that, but again, my personal journey. So the Seeds of Liberation point to what leaders, I think, in any category, in any nation, need to have in terms of regard for the people, for doing things for the benefit of people, for the welfare of people. So I had some qualities there in terms of Seeds of Liberation. I would like the Black church to even read it closely so that they can see how the church, again, can be more instrumental in becoming a self-determining people and how we can build power for ourselves. In 2022, I'm looking forward to being able to discuss that some more in several platforms. And in 2022, my business, Child Focus Consulting, we seek to expand our services so that we can benefit more children and help them in literacy so that they can be successful in school and successful in their lives.
That is fascinating. You've got a great future ahead. Looking forward to it. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Oh, there are several, but I would just say, I have to say my father was when I look back, my father was a big influence, period, on my life in terms of, again, giving me the love for reading, taking his daughters to the library to sign out books, telling us that education, get your education, no one can take that away from you. He was a great influence. And my mother also, even though they were not certified teachers, they do what certified teachers do. They demonstrated and explained different things to us to teach us how to iron clothes, how to wash clothes, those type of things. And my mother taught me how to braid her hair. I just said, Mama, can you teach me? And she would do it right then, but explaining and demonstrating. So my parents were the greatest impacts on my life, and the late Reverend Albert B. Clay Jr., who created this theology of Black Christian nationalism, and the founders of the Shrines of the Black Madonna. So I would say those great influences on my life. I could name about 4 other people, but I would just keep it at that.
That's fine. I'm influenced as it. They're just amazing people. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
The best advice that I can give is that we all share the same earth. If we can accept that truth, that the earth is our home, and it's home to many different people, many different species of animals, many different trees and plants. The Native Americans said that the earth doesn't belong to us, we belong to the earth. Mm-hmm. And so if individuals can see that this is our home together and live accordingly, and where our politicians and lawmakers know that the benefit and the welfare of the people is their job. That is their job. So I would love to have peace and harmony on earth, where children and all the hungry is being fed, and where there is no suffering. And I believe we can build a heaven on earth. I lived it in the Shrines of the Black Madonna. There was no crime, there was no hunger, no homelessness. It was debt-free. So that prototype, I believe, can be an example for not only me as an African-American, but for any people. So a peaceful, harmonious world where we all have all our needs met, both physically and emotionally.
Very amazing. I love it, Dr. Shelley. That's great. Once again, we're with author, educator, Dr. Shelley McIntosh of her book, Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation, here on the Mike Wagner Show. Dr. Shelley, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep this up to date. Keep in touch. We'd love to have you back on. Once again, tell us about your upcoming projects. What's your website? How do people contact you? Or can people purchase or check out your works and check out your services?
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. And I would love to come back on. So my website, Shelley McIntosh, is spelled with SHELLEY, MCINTOSH.com. You can find loads of information there. And so they can contact me. My phone number is there, email address. If they go to the website, they should be able to get in contact with me.
Sounds great. We're certainly looking forward to it. Once again, Dr. Shelley, a big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep this up to date. Keep in touch. We'd love to have you back. We wish you all the best. You've got a great future ahead of you.
Thank you, Mike. Have a great evening.